Dear friends, welcome again to the special satsang. This satsang is to discuss about the topic life before birth and after death, particularly because there were several requests to discuss this as this was not part of the introspection curriculum anymore. So this session itself, the logistics of the session, let us make it an interactive discussion as much as possible. So I believe you are able to unmute and speak. So whichever point you have a question, please feel free to interrupt me and we can clear the question quickly. And I will also prompt for questions at appropriate points. All right. So the topic, life before birth and after death, it's a topic of great interest for all of us, particularly because every one of us have wondered at one point or the other, what is it that we are going to be after our death? Because death is something that many of us fear. And obviously there is a question as to, was I somebody else in the previous birth? The question of rebirth is there in everyone's mind. So that is where the question about what was I before birth comes. So there are two questions when you look at the topic, but then there is a third question that is missing in the topic itself, but very much implied in the topic. Can anyone guess what the third question that got left out? So what is life before birth is the first question, and what is life after death is the second question, right? There is a question that is implied in this topic, but is left out.
What is life presently?
Exactly, right? So, there is some sort of energy flowing through our body, and it gives us life. We call it life energy. That's how I always, whenever somebody asks me what life energy is, that's how I explain life energy. So, Swamiji says, for us to understand the state of the life energy, of our own life energy, before our birth or after our death, we need to understand the missing link. How is it that life operates during our life itself? So with that question also added to our list, let us proceed to explain, to discuss this topic. Okay. Now, there were many people in history as well as in the current modern world, scientists, philosophers, ancient sages that have sought to understand what the life energy particle is, how it manifested, and how it works. There were not many people that precisely zeroed down on the definition of life energy. Scientists were not able to see it or measure it with their instruments. And a group of sages that Maharishi calls as, Vedanta, that originate from the Vedanta line of explanation, they sought to explain everything in terms of the Panchabhutas. So this group of saints or scientists in ancient times that exactly understood and explained life energy are called Siddhas. Siddh means life energy, and they explained life energy, as we all know, in terms of the truth or the primordial state, and then how the life energy manifested from that, and then how life transformed into different things, and as human beings, and in human beings, how life energy and its associated magnetism functions as mind, right? So there are three things that they explain, our Siddhas: the primordial state, or the truth, or the divine state, and then the second is life energy particle, the energy particle, and then the third thing is mind. These three were called as the secrets, Marai Porutkal in Tamil. So they also named it in Sanskrit as Sat Chit Anandam. You might have heard the term Satchidanandam. What it means is Sat, which is the truth, Sit, which is the energy particle or the fractional state of the truth. Anantam is the many blossoms of the biomagnetism into mind and its different experiences, right? So that is Anantam. So Sit or life energy, like we said, cannot be measured or understood very easily. But we all have learned in our sky yoga practices that the life energy can be felt when the mind withdraws through the practice of our yoga and meditation and contracts and settles on the source of it, which is the life energy itself. That is how we get the feeling of the life energy, right? So this is the basic introduction to life energy. We all know this, but just as a reminder, we have recapped what we know in basic terms in terms of life energy and its context. Life energy is closely connected to the divine state. It is also the base of our mind. It is in the middle. It is a central theme. Okay. Now, life energy was also explained as Akash by the Vedantis, right? So, life energy was explained as the first of the Panchabhutas, or the first of the 5 elements, right? So everything that we see in this universe is a manifestation or a grouping of the Panchabhutas, as they explained it. And all the Panchabhutas are nothing but a grouping of the life energy. We also know that. Now, why can't be life energy measured? Why can't life energy be seen? The answer is it is so small. It is the smallest of the smallest, right? So Swamiji wants us to understand the size of the life energy in explaining this theory. In trying to explain the size or how large the life energy is, Swamiji quotes a poem from Tirumandiram. The poem goes like this: Meviya Sivan Vadivathu Sollidil Kovin Mayirondru Noorudan Kuritu Meviya Kuradu Ayiram Aviyin Kuru Noorayirathu Ondre. So the bottom line is, if you cut the hair of a cow, the hair of a cow is so very, very thin, like very golden strand, very thin, very subtle. And if you cut it crosswise, then that ensuing circle that you see in the cross section, if you divide it by 100, and then that 1/100th of that size, divide it again by 1000, that is the size of the life energy particle, which is 1 by 100, 1 by 1 lakh times the size of the cross section of the cow's hair. So such a minute energy particle cannot be measured by instruments, cannot be seen by any sort of magnifying instruments. So that is why the life energy needed to be understood by the practice of yoga, by going to a frequency that is smaller than the life energy itself. Okay. So life energy, as we know, is the basis of everything that we see. Okay. So it is the central theme of the seen universe. Okay. Whatever we can see in this universe as cosmic objects, everything is a grouping of the life energy. And life energy is also the basis before the divine state. The first thing that the divine state manifested as is the life energy. So let us, it is very important that we understand this central theme between the seen phenomenon and the unseen phenomenon, right? Right. Now let us understand a little bit, let us think a little bit more in terms of how life energy functions within the human beings. Okay. So in the human beings, there are 3 bodies. Can anyone tell me what the 3 bodies are?
Physical, causal, and astral.
Physical, causal, and astral, right? So physical body is, we all know, what we see as flesh and bones and blood, right? Made up of cells. And the life energy functions through the body. And that body is called what? What is the name of the body that corresponds to the life energy?
Sukshma Sarira.
Sukshma Sariram, correct. Sukma Udal. Exactly. In English, it is called astral body. Okay. Now, this life energy. So the astral body, how would it be? Let us imagine. The astral body would be consisting of millions and billions of these minute energy particles that are flowing through our body like electric current. Correct. That is how we are alive. Now, these energy particles, are they static or are they spinning? We all know the answer, right? It is spinning at such a fast speed. And when this life energy particles, millions and millions of life energy particles circulate through our body and spinning at such a fast speed. First of all, why are they spinning? Can anyone tell me? Why is the life energy particle spinning?
Due to self-compressive force.
Exactly, right? So the absolute space is compressing it from all directions, and the energy particles are spinning as a result. And when it is spinning at a very fast speed, what phenomenon does it give rise to? When it has friction with the magnetic field, with the absolute space, right? When we ask that question, we all have studied that. It gives rise to a concept called magnetism. So magnetism or magnetic energy is a very subtle form of energy compared to the life energy. So think of the life energy as water drops, and think of the magnetism around the life energy as water droplets or mist. Okay, so so as a result, whenever life energy functions through the body, it causes a magnetic field also, which also circulates throughout the body like a mist. And this magnetic field is even more subtle and very closer to the divine state, because it is nothing but a wave of the divine state of the absolute space, right? So magnetic field in itself, the magnetic energy itself is Pranavam, Maharishi says. It is itself a very close manifestation of the divine state in everything that we see. So this body is called as, what is the name of the body that corresponds to the magnetic energy?
Causal.
Causal, right? So now, whenever another concept that we need to understand is, we have an astral body and causal body functioning in our life, in our physical body. And whenever this biomagnetism circulates throughout the body, there is a center of operation, and we all know that it is called the Muladhara Chakra. We all know that, right? And what happens at the Muladhara Chakra? Essentially, the intensification of the magnetic field collects all our experiences as the genetic center. And similarly, will life energy have its own center of action? Will it also have its own operating center? Yes or no?
Yes.
And that intensification is also at the Muladhara center, Muladhara Chakra, correct? So the life energy also intensifies at the Muladhara Chakra. Similar to how the heart is at the center of the blood flow, whenever the blood goes to all the organs, it comes back and settles back into the heart and gets purified through the lungs, and then heart pumps it back to everywhere. The center of action in our body, right? That is where the energy is supplied through our metabolic process. So any energy, whenever energy goes throughout the body, when it slows down, it comes back to the center of operation. It gets coated with ectoplasm, and it gets the intensified magnetic energy and acquires speed again, and then comes back out from that center and goes throughout the body, loses its speed, and comes back to the center. So this is the life energy functions exactly like the blood is pumped from the heart. Similar to how um, the blood goes to the heart and then comes back with oxygen, supplies the entire body. Life energy goes to the center and gets coated with the magnetic intensification, and then comes back and loses all its energy. Okay, so and similarly, the magnetic field also is circulating throughout the body. Okay, so so imagine this model in your mind. Okay, so whenever life energy particles are circulating, one more concept we need to understand is, can they come together? Can they merge with each other? Yes or no? Can two energy particles come together and merge with each other in the body?
No.
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 Right. Because why?
Repulsion.
Repulsion. Exactly. That is the key word. So there is a repulsive force because it spins fast. And can they completely separate and disintegrate? Can that happen?
No.
Because why?
So self-compressive force.
There is also an attraction there, correct? So the entire body function is enabled by this attractive and repulsive force. Okay, so let us keep that in mind also. Okay. Now, so we are lining up all these concepts before we jump into how the life starts within us. Okay, so there is only one more concept, so please bear with me. So we have established that established the astral body, the biomagnetic energy, and the center of action for it. And the biomagnetism, we all know, has 5 transformations, right? How are they? Which organs are the biomagnetism transforming through?
The Panchabhutas,
There are
the Panchendriyas
panchendriyas are the sensory organs. Okay.
sensory organs.
Exactly. So through the sensory organs, our biomagnetism is constantly being transformed. On top of these 5 transformation, there is the 6th special transformation. What is it called?
Mind.
Mind. Exactly. So Swamiji says biomagnetism is transformed into, in Tamil he says, Alitham Voli Voli Suvai Manam and Manam. Okay, which is mind. Okay. So pressure, sound, light, and taste, smell, and mind. Okay, so these are the 6 transformations. And when this biomagnetism goes through the transformations, we feel 4 different states of our mind. There are 4 different states that our biomagnetism goes through that we feel in our mind. What are those 4 different states?
Pain, pleasure, peace, and ecstasy.
Exactly. Pain, pleasure, peace, and ecstasy. Okay, let's keep that in mind. We will understand this. We will discuss about this a little bit more. Okay. So what we have discussed so far is, we have just reminded ourselves of, life energy in the context of the complete explanation that we have heard from our Swamiji in the Brahmayanam course, Sat, Sit, and Anandam, which is the divine space, life energy, and mind. These are the 3 secrets of existence. And then we talked about life energy itself, the size of it, and how life energy functions within humans results in the biomagnetism, its transformations, and its states that are felt within our mind. Okay. Now let us talk about life and our birth. Okay. So we all know, at a very high level, fairly high level, life begins when we are born. Correct? Our life begins when we are born. It is fairly fine to say that, make that statement, right? But let us ask a very precise question. When did our life start? Okay. When did our life start? Okay. There are multiple choices there. We don't need to give the answer immediately, but let us just think about all the possibilities, right? So you might have heard life starts when we are born, right? On our date of birth. And some of you might say life starts when we are conceived within our mother's womb, right? That is the second choice. You might has anybody heard the theory that life starts when you are in the 7th month in your mother's womb? Has anybody heard the theory? Doesn't look like it, right? So if you heard about it, say yes. Otherwise, you don't need to answer.
Yes.
Okay. Where did you hear about it? And can you give a little bit more details?
In one of the Siddhar's song, every month, that 10 months period when the life evolves,
Correct.
he describes in one of the song. I don't recall immediately.
Okay. So there was also a theory that
Like number 0 to 9.
Correct. We'll go to that song in a minute. Okay. So there is a theory based on some early scientists, ancient scientists, that life started, not necessarily Siddhas. Siddhas probably understood pretty well about when life started, but some early scientists in their respected thinking, they try to understand it based on logic. They understood that they thought that life started in the 7th month in the mother's womb. The reason was, in the 7th month, the lungs are formed in the mother's womb, and the lungs start breathing. Okay, the baby's lungs start breathing. So since everyone associated life with breathing, there was a theory in the olden days that life started in the 7th month. Okay, so there is a song that goes like this: Uruttaru mudarthingal kambamam. Like the stages of the baby's growth within the mother's womb, okay, is described in this poem. Uruttaru mudarthingal kambamam, irumadiyil utradalai mudugum mugama, ஓது 3ஆம் திங்கள் செங்கையும் பாதங்கள், உருவிரல்கள் அறையும் உண்டாம், திருத்து 4ஆம் திங்கள் மூக்கு முகம் உருவமாம், செய்ய 5ஆம் திங்கள் செவி நாவு கண்களாம், செப்பு 6ஆம் திங்கள் சேர்ந்திடும் நகங்கள் உண்டாம், விஞ்சு 7ஆம் திங்கள் மயிர் நரம்பு எலும்புடன் விளைந்திடும் சடமோடுதான், மேவிடும் சலம் மலம் தங்கு தாதுக்களும் விளைந்து மூச்சாகுமே. So the poem goes on like this. There is a few more stanzas, but what it tries to explain is what is the shape of the baby's body, okay, in the mother's womb, starting from the 1st month all the way until the 10th month. And in the ancient days, how did they understand this? Right? You might have heard about this ritual that when the mother dies, when the mother dies, when the baby with the baby in the womb, in the olden days, they kind of made a ritual saying that it is not good for the family if the body is buried as such or burnt as such. You need to separate the mother and the baby and then bury it. So this way they found out the growth of the baby in the mother's womb, according to what Swamiji had explained. The Arabic numerals were the Hindu Arabic numerals. If you Google it, the numbers as we know it, starting from 1 all the way until 10, okay, these are called Hindu Arabic numerals. Okay, they originated in the ancient Indian tradition, and it was announced to the Western world in the 6th or 7th century by Mid-Eastern mathematicians. And these numbers symbolize the stages of the baby's growth in the mother's womb. So in the 1st month, as the poem explains, it is a stick, Mudarthingal Kambamam. Okay, so if you look at now the number 1, it is like a stick. And the number 2 symbolizes the growth of the head. And the number 3 also symbolizes the growth in the bottom, which is the legs. And 4 is shaped like the nose, and it symbolizes nose. And 5 was drawn to symbolize ears. And 6 is like a sharp edge at the top, right? So it symbolizes nails. And 7 was somehow symbolizes your nerves and bones, and 8 is a complete circle, right, on both sides. So it symbolizes that the body building of the baby in the mother's womb is complete. Okay. And then 9 means the sharpness is pointing downwards, which indicates that the baby is ready to leave the mother's womb. 10 is 1 and 0, separate, right? So it indicates a separation. So such a growth happens where the organs develop stage by stage in every month. So if you think about this very carefully and very closely, Maharishi asked the question, will this growth happen without life from the very beginning? Okay. முன்னம் சிறு துளியான மூல விந்து நாதத்தால் முழுமையாக எனது உடல் முற்றறிவன் திருவருளால் சூட்சுமமாய் குறுகி நின்று தொடங்கியது தன் வளர்ச்சி. So he explains that my life began when the sperm and ovum, sperm from the father and the ovum of the mother, Bindu and Nadam in Tamil, both are life energy in different forms in the feminine and masculine gender, right? When they come together, the two energies are now conjoined. Two separate life energies with two separate characters are now conjoined to form a single energy grouping that are now operating together. This is the starting gene or the starting chromosome. Okay, according to Swamiji. So this starting chromosome or gene, okay, will not grow without the associated magnetic or the genetic imprints. Okay, the energy that conjoined has now brought the blueprints of the personality of the father and the blueprint of the personality of the mother together as a result of the magnetic field also operating together, right? The biomagnetic field of the two energies that are now conjoined. So without this blueprint, the new life cannot develop. Okay, so this conjoined energy uses the blueprint and builds itself into the entire life form, into the fully manifested baby that we just discussed. So this is how life starts. And whenever life energy started at conception in the starting gene, how was it supplied? It was the life energy of our mother and the life energy of our father. And if you go take the life energy of your mother, for example, how did that life energy started? With the life energy of your mother's father and mother's mother, right? So if you keep going on all the way back, okay, so where did the first life energy started? By accident, by a divine action through mutation. The first human being was somehow accidentally formed, right? From the first human being's life energy all the way until now, the same life energy has conjoined itself into multiple generations and come as our own life energy. Okay, so our life energy, is it just our life energy? It is the life energy of all our ancestors. So this is the logic that Swamiji proves to us. Okay, so now the question is, who were we before we were born? In terms of our life energy, who were we before we were born? Were we born as somebody else, or were we were we all manifestation of our ancestors? We are all manifestation of our ancestors, correct? So if you look at what your previous life is, previous birth is, our previous birth is our parents, their parents, all our ancestors, right? And what will happen down the chain? Our life energy will be transferred into our children, right? So what will happen to how will our life energy live on after our death? Now, can anybody guess? How will our
children?
Through our children. That only answers part of the question, right? Because we have given our life energy to our children, and they're all going to be procreating as well, and their children, and will keep on going. So the life energy keeps on going in a downward chain, but our energy in our body still remains, correct? What will happen to that? Okay, so This is the logic that we have learned so far. Okay. Any questions? I'll stop here. Any quick questions? Okay.
There are some people do not have progeny itself, right? So how it will transfer to the next generation?
So it doesn't transfer to the next generation for them, correct? Because of whatever reason, a medical reason, or because their imprints are in such a way that they're able to expiate them during the current life itself. They don't create any progenies. So the first case that we discussed, that they're procreating, their life energy continues through their children. There is life after their death through their children. That is gone. That chain is cut for them, correct? That is the answer to your question. Now, but then there is their life energy itself. There is something is going to happen to their life, right? After they die, which is what we are going to understand moving forward. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
Now, before we go into birth and death itself, was somebody going to ask a question?
Yeah, Ayya Volga Varamudan, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you were telling that even all the inanimate objects also has the life energy.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
So what happens to that life energy? Because there is also continuous motion of this wind Shakti in those inanimate objects too.
Yes. Very good question. So when we discuss Brahmajnanam, how did we how did we differentiate between animate and inanimate objects? How did we differentiate between living things and non-living things? In living thing, we said, what did we say? Paramaya Saktiyul Panjama Budam Tharam Mari Tondrum Pirappu, correct? Meaning when the first Buddha, that is the Akash, came and was trapped within the other four elements that are in some harmonious blend, and it is trapped inside and it doesn't escape. Now it now establishes a self-sustaining circulation within that object. Then only life forms in that, right? In the inanimate objects, the life energy doesn't stay there, doesn't circulate inside. It is connected to the universal energy field, right? So there, the life energy of the inanimate object is the same as the energy of the entire universe. So the energy in the inanimate object is the universal energy itself. Okay, but even though it is called as a different name called Bhutakash, okay, in Sanskrit. Does that answer your question, Vanmari?
Yes, yeah. And one more thing to add to that, because of this life energy, which is in constant motion, even in the inanimate objects, it emits a type of magnetism. So
Correct.
every object has magnetism, not only human beings.
That magnetism, is it called biomagnetism or universal magnetism?
No, it is not biomagnetism. It is not universal magnetism. It is the magnetism of that particular object.
It is, you could say that, but since that object exists within the universe, it doesn't have a self-sustaining circulation. Swamiji calls the magnetism coming from anything that is not a living thing as universal magnetism, Vangandam. Okay, so you heard Swamiji explain two different things, right? Two different types of magnetism only. Have you heard a third magnetism definition? Only two magnetism. One is Vangandam, right, or universal magnetism. The second is biomagnetism. So the answer to that question is any inanimate object, inanimate object, the magnetism coming from it should also be considered as universal magnetism.
Actually, three, right? Chittakash, Bhutakash, and Mahakash.
In Sanskrit, they have named it as Bhutakash also. It is a special differentiation that they have given it. Okay, but it is not. They didn't define magnetism. Okay, Akash is life energy particle, right? So they call it as Bhutakash, and Chittakash is essentially any energy that is flowing within that is alone and flowing alone, right? And what was the other three? The third one?
Chittakash is within us, actually. Chittakash.
Within us.
Bhutakash is inanimate, and then Mahakash is the universe, or
Is
like
universal energy field, right?
yes, universe. Yeah.
But it is not the magnetism. Okay. So in Sanskrit, in the Vedantis, somehow differentiated the energy as the universal energy field, which is present everywhere, and anything that is coming together and comprising any of the other four elements, they call it as Bhutakash. Okay. And they differentiated the energy flowing within the body as Chittakash. Okay. But when Maharishi explains magnetism, he just differentiates it between universal and biomagnetism. So, according to the Sky Yoga philosophy, anything that comes from the inanimate objects, any magnetism, is also universal magnetism. I know we kind of digressed a little bit away from your original question, Vanmati, but do you still have any outstanding question in your mind?
No, yeah, now it is clear. Thank you. Thanks for your clarity.
Okay. I know there are different interpretation and explanations, right? So when in Sky Yoga, we have explained things a certain way. Just like, in Tamil, the karmas are explained as only two different things. What are they? Padavinai and Puhuvinai. Yes. In Sanskrit, they explain it as three different things, right? Sanchita and Prarabdha and Akamya, correct? So, so different ways of seeing those different things, but you can understand the logic in everything. All right. Now, one more thing. Now let us think about the state of our mind, right? Let me ask this question: why don't we experience our birth, and why don't we experience our death? Right? We all have when we were born, we never remember what happened. Okay, but after we were a little baby, when we started growing up, we start remembering things, right? But when we were born, our mind can never experience our birth, and when we die, also our mind can never experience our death. Okay, so Swamiji explains this beautifully. So when we come out of the mother's womb and when we leave this world, our life energy expansion into the mind doesn't happen. Okay, the expansion of the life energy as the mind does not happen. There are two ways our magnetism functions within our body through our nervous systems. What are those two ways? Two states of our biomagnetism functions. Does anyone know?
Is it the central nervous system and
autonomous
nervous system?
So biomagnetism functions in our body through our nervous systems, energy paths, okay, in two different states. One is the autonomous. Whatever happens automatically is autonomous, right? Your digestion, the repairing of your cells, and your anything that happens automatically in your body, right? Autonomous. And central is whatever you do out of your own volition, out of your own choice. Swamiji says, during birth, the central nervous system does not function during birth or even death. The way this things automatically happens, he gives a beautiful name. It's called superconscious instinctive action state. Okay, Swamiji says our energy functions during birth as in a very superconscious instinctive action state. The order of function of the divine consciousness guides it. Okay, but this can be felt by the mind. Okay, it's like you are in a coma state during birth. It's like you are in a coma state during death. Okay, but there is a way to experience this using your mind. Okay, so I'm going to ask the question: how is it that you can go into the superconscious state? Okay, and experience and understand and feel this experience through your mind, or visualize this experience through your mind? because it's a coma state. How can you go to
Turiyatita.
Turyatita meditation, and exactly what frequency you have to be in a coma but still be awake?
1 to 3.
1, 2, 3. Delta.
Perfect. Delta. I was worried that somebody will say the theta state. Not even theta state. Your mind has to be in the delta state, 1 to 3 cycles per second, and in that state, your mind, even though your energy will be in the state of a coma, your mind will still be conscious and awake. This is called superconscious, transcendental, active state of mind. Okay, so even though we cannot immediately go there because we are not we are not in the self-realized state yet, saints like Swamiji have already gone to that state and explained this concept of what happens during life and death, and given us this theory, right? From their superconscious, transcendental, active state of mind. So let us, that theory when understood, when it makes logical sense, we can accept it, right? Now, let us think about how death happens, okay? Life and death, okay? Now, we reminded ourselves of something, right? What is the center of action for our blood flow? Your heart.
Heart.
Right? Even the heart, what does it do when the blood comes to the heart? Through another compartment in a heart, it pumps all the impure blood to your lungs. In the lungs, the blood comes through all the capillaries and comes out, and the breathing, when you breathe in the air, about I think it is like 16% or something like that is oxygen, right? 25 to 16%. I forgot the exact percentage. Okay, there is oxygen coming in along with nitrogen and other gases, and the oxygen comes in and oxidizes the impurities in the blood and comes out, and the oxygen coming out is reduced in quantity, and the other missing piece is now filled with carbon dioxide, the impurities in the blood, right? Similarly, okay, there is a purifying or energizing action for our life energy also, okay? So the way the life energy and the biomagnetism functions in the body is, whenever the life energy circulates in our body, it creates a biomagnetic field, and this biomagnetic field intensifies at our Mooladhara. Now, this biomagnetism is like this energy field through which the life energy can freely move, okay? And it is, the life energy also carries the biomagnetism, right? Now, it's like a highway through which the life energy particles go. And when it goes through the different cells, the life energy slows down because it loses its biomagnetic energy. Its speed of spinning, okay? Because it is going through the different cells, giving energy to the cells, right? So as a result, whenever the life energy particles come out of the Mooladhara and spread throughout the body in a blossoming action, they go out, they slow down and come back to the center. In the center, what is there? The intensified biomagnetic energy and the intensified life energy particle. Constantly, there is Ojas being supplied from our metabolic process. You might all have learned about how Ojas is produced through the Kayakalpa course, right? The food gets converted into all these different elements, blood, flesh, etc., and all the way to bone marrow. And from bone marrow, Ojas gets converted, and it comes through the spinal cord and settles down. The excess settles down at the base of the spine, right? This Ojas is the energizing energy that constantly energizes the intensified life energy at the Mooladhara chakra, okay? So this Ojas coated, ectoplasm coated life energy is immediately acquires more speed. When it acquires more speed in the center, it cannot stay in the center. Only when it is slow, it can come to the center. When it acquires more speed, where does it go? Comes back again throughout the body, right? So this is how life energy, just like the blood flow we explained, life energy circulates throughout the body. It's like a pumping action, let's say, okay, for the life energy. And life energy spreads biomagnetism throughout the body along with it. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. All right.
It looks like
மாஸ்டர் முரளி வாழ்க வளமுடன். நீங்க வந்து லைஃப் எனர்ஜி ஆஃப்டர் டெத் எங்க போகும் அப்படின்ட்டு ஒரு கொஸ்டின் கேட்டீங்க. ஸோ ஆர் வி ஸ்டில் டுவர்ட்ஸ் தட் ஆன்சர்?
We're going towards the answer.
Okay.
By understanding how life energy functions within the body, we are going to understand how the life energy is going to gradually weaken and we are going to die. Okay, that is the direction we are going towards.
Okay. Thank you.
There was another question. Was there another question? Okay.
No.
actually-
I just know we are still going towards that answer. Yeah. Thank you.
Sir, you
So
will-
basically, I could, Murali, I could imagine like faster spinning objects like electron and atom itself, like slower moving objects are in the center, like proton and neutron,
Mhm.
and faster spinning is in the outer periphery. It is similar to that, right? It will go to the center and then
it is a
sync up
close-
with the ectoplasm and then again go back like an electron. Same energy particle becomes like an electron, then again becomes like a proton, something like that. Is that right?
It's a very close analogy. It's a very close analogy, but not
Okay.
exactly the same. Okay, very close analogy, right? But the way Swamiji explains is comparing it to the blood flow, right? But I think we have clearly explained it, right? Whenever it is, whenever something slows down, it has to go towards the center because it is part of a circulation, right? In any circulation, when something slows down, it cannot repel the center, right? So it will go down to the center, and when it spins faster again, it cannot stay in the center. It has to go to the periphery. Okay, we all know this from the law of physics. Now we need to understand this concept very clearly for us to understand how life energy functions within the body and to understand how our death happens. Okay, so I think we have established this particular concept fairly reasonably, but we can talk about it again if needed. One more thing.
Is this like a centripetal and centrifugal force? No.
Exactly, centripetal and centrifugal force. Centripetal is heavier particles are attracted towards the
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
centripetal force is attracted towards the center. Okay, centrifugal means I think lighter particles are thrown away from the center. Okay, I think that is how it works. Okay, I'm a physics graduate, so I should know.
Okay.
All right. Now, okay. One more thing is, it is not the same group of life energy particles that you have in your body all the time. Okay, that is also something you need to understand. Okay, so it is like a river constantly flowing. Okay, we are getting life energy from many different sources. We have learned that, right? From our food, we are getting life energy, and from the Earth's radiation, we are getting it. From the universal energy, we are getting it, right? From water, from the atmosphere, right? So there are many different sources. So Swamiji also says we are getting the life energy particles are coming into our body and also leaving our body at all times. Okay, so keep that in mind also. But it is not directly relevant to the topic of our discussion. But keep that in mind also. Okay, and one more thing. One more thing is the body that you see yesterday is not the same body that you see today. It's a constantly transforming thing. Okay, let's say if you don't eat for a day, you lose 5 kgs. You lose let's say 0.5 kgs or 1 kg, whatever it is, right? So what happens without your life energy leaving, without you losing your cells? Can you go down in your weight, right? So in using that logic, we need to also keep in our mind that our body is constantly gaining and losing life energy. The intermediate thing that stays within our body is what we are using it as our life energy and as the topic of our discussion. Okay, all right. Now we said four states of magnetism being spent, right? What did we say? Peace, pleasure, pain, and ecstasy. Okay. So what is peace? Can somebody tell me? When you're feeling peace in terms of your magnetic expense, what is peace?
There is no pain or no pleasure.
No pain or no pleasure. Okay.
Intermediate state.
Intermediate state no, actually not intermediate state. It is the base state. Okay. Peace is the base state. Okay. When you, for example, listen to music, what happens? How do you spend biomagnetic energy? Through which organ? Through your ears, correct? When you listen to music, you're actually releasing energy through your ears and spending that your biomagnetic energy and listening to that music. The block of your biomagnetic energy as your music, right? When you're seeing something, your bright object, you're releasing biomagnetic energy through your eyes. That energy is now blocked by that object. It comes back and you see the difference as that sensation, right? So when you're seeing something bright, you're actually spending excess energy from your eyes than it normally does, and experiencing that as an enjoyment of a movie or something that you're seeing that is beautiful, right? But when you're not doing anything, your eyes are not looking at anything particular, your ears are not listening to anything. It is quiet around you, right? What do you say to that? It's my ears are just simply not doing anything. My tongue is not tasting anything, right? Even in that state, Swamiji says we are spending energy. Okay, that is the peaceful conversion of your life of your biomagnetic energy. So this is peace. Okay. And when you are peaceful and when you sleep and you get up and you're conserving your energy, there is a lot of energy in your body, right? When there is enough surplus in your body, then when you spend it, there is a relief that you have, right? We all know about relief. Whenever we have our bladder is full, we want to urinate urgently. We have to go to the bathroom, right? And when we pass urine, then it's such a relief, right? Similarly, we all have a certain capacity in our body. Okay, some of us through spiritual practices can enhance our capacity to always hold more biomagnetic energy. That's what we should be striving for. But normally, a normal human being, after a certain surplus is built, immediately feels the urge to spend his biomagnetic energy in different enjoyment actions, sensory enjoyments. And when we spend the surplus, that is felt as pleasure, correct? And the same energy you spend more and more. When you watch one movie, you're fine, okay, you feel good. When you watch the second movie, your eyes feel a little tired. The third movie, you're almost ready to sleep and fall unconscious, right? Your eyes start paining, right? So this is called as pain. The same action resulted in pleasure. The same action, when it is exceeded in limit or even method, okay, is now felt as pain, right? So this is pain. And ecstasy is, what is ecstasy? Somebody said, tell me quickly, and then we'll go down. Ecstasy.
So it's a state of mind where it merges with the super consciousness.
When it merges with the super consciousness, you are feeling an abundance in life and in biomagnetic energy also, because you are resonating with the universal energy. So you'll feel an abundance of energy in your body, right? You won't feel the surplus need to spend it in sensory enjoyments, but rather you will be one with the bliss of the universal energy, magnetic energy, right? That is ecstasy. Now, when we experience pain, what Swamiji says is, how do we experience pain? The reason is when somewhere your biomagnetic flow is disturbed or blocked, okay, at that time the biomagnetic energy cannot flow freely to wherever it needs to flow into, right? So at that time the biomagnetic energy accumulates in that point. when it accumulates in that point, what happens? The biomagnetic energy gets converted into electrical energy. Electrical energy means it starts burning everything right there. So it starts damaging the cells, right? So when it starts damaging the cells, it is now not going to wherever it needs to go to, but rather it is expanding the damage in terms of that place, and it is spending more and more energy in terms of time. Okay, so this is what we experience as pain. And when this pain lasts for a longer and longer time, then it is felt as disease, right? So in this state, okay, let us go back to how we understood life energy operates in the body. Whenever it loses the speed, it goes into the center and then gets enough energy and then comes out, right? So now you have disease in your body, and that means you have punctures in your body which is constantly leaking energy. Okay, energy is not going to the place where it needs to go to. As a result, whichever organs need to function properly is not functioning properly. So as a result, more and more energy is being spent to rectify the situation. Your immunity tries to do that, and when you cannot cure this with medicines or your own efforts, what happens is when you have 100% energy in a healthy state, now you have less and less, 80% stock force. So you are feeling tired constantly, and the life energy that goes in, let's say 10 life energy particles goes into the center, only 8 come back. Okay, and your disease worsens. Let's say 10 life energy particles slow down and go in, only 4 come back. Okay, like this, the intensity of your stock force keeps reducing from, let's say, 100% to 80%, a less energetic person. From 80% to, let's say, 65%, a diseased person, right? Some from 65% to, let's say, 55%, a chronically ill patient that is bedridden, right? And let's say the life energy stock force goes to 30 or 40%. What happens is all the life energy particles, they don't have speed, right? When they slow down, where do they come to? They come to the center. And now only when they come to the center, and only when they acquire speed and go back again, then there is enough space in the center to hold it. Otherwise, what happens? All the life energy particles are now converging in the center. So there is a mass stampede kind of situation, correct? A mass stampede kind of situation. Now, all the life energy particles and the biomagnetic intensity are now converging at the same place. And what happens? There is a short circuit, and the short circuit converts the biomagnetism to electricity right there in your Mooladhara, right there in your genetic center. When this happens, Swamiji says, the electricity that gets converted into heat really intensifies and disconnect all the nerves that are there in your Mooladhara chakra, in your genetic center, in your sexual vital fluid sac. When this happens, the sexual vital fluid, the sac, it breaks because of the nerves being disconnected, and the sexual vital fluid comes out. It is excreted fully. Okay, this is where we need to understand the importance of our sexual vital fluid, right? Life energy is like electrical current. Okay, like electrical energy, something needs to hold it, like a chemical fluid holds the electrical energy in a car battery, for example. Like a helium balloon needs to be always tied, otherwise it will fly away, correct? Similarly, without our sexual vital fluid, life energy cannot be sustained in the body, cannot be held inside the body. Our battery has now broken, right? So when this happens, the sexual vital fluid leaves, the life energy also leaves the body and dissolves in the universal energy field. Okay, so what happens to our life energy? Okay, our life energy, one part we said is transmitted to our progenies, to our children. Okay, and it is conjoined with your partner and lives on as your children. But your life energy that is in your body now is excreted and dissolves into the universal energy field. But, okay, your soul, okay, somebody tell me what soul is, define what soul is according to what Swamiji taught us. What is your soul?
So it's also called the genetic center, right?
Yes. Does everyone agree? Does anyone has a different definition of soul? Right. So the genetic center is also your Atman, your soul, according to Swamiji. Okay. So your personality, your Arivachitaram, as they call in Tamil, is your genetic center itself. Okay. So this genetic center is now left without a place to stay in. Okay. The universal energy field is gone. Okay. The sexual vital fluid is gone because so the universal energy field also disintegrates. Sorry, not the universal energy, your life energy also disintegrates. And then since your life energy disintegrates, the biomagnetic field, okay, the energy, that is your genetic center, now also detaches from the body. But your soul or your genetic center or your biomagnetic energy, that intensification does not dissolve in the universal magnetic field because they are of different frequencies. The universal magnetic field's frequency is at a very pure state. We all know that, right? Now, the genetic center has characterized so many heavy imprints, experiences, right? So this genetic center cannot, the soul cannot dissolve into the universal magnetic field. So it becomes like a floating pocket. Okay, it's like a air pocket. It is like a floating pocket in the universal energy field. Okay, like a bubble. Okay, now this has more intensified, faster spinning energy than the universal magnetic energy. Okay, so this faster spinning bioenergy cannot, in its intensification, cannot immediately dissolve into the universal magnetic field, Vankandam. So what happens is this soul is now floating in the universal magnetic field, either close to the earth or away from the earth, depending on its purity. Okay, and moves at a very fast speed, at the speed of a light. Okay, at the speed of a light based on different circumstances. Okay. So I will stop here. Now we are going into the metaphysical world. Okay, what happens to the soul? Okay, what happens when there is a natural death? How is the soul? What happens when there is an accidental death? How the soul will be, right? What we are going to explore a concept called soul attachment. We are going to talk about all that. Near-death experiences. We are going to talk about all that. Okay. Any quick questions before we go into that? About death itself?
வாழ்க வளமுடன் Murali. It's pretty interesting. I was going to ask you that how to spend it via sensory, and then as the pain comes, the energy accumulates at one part that causes the pain. But we also, as the pain happens, we spend the same kind of sensory, use the spending via the sensory, and that relieves the pain also. What would be your, what do you think in this scenario?
Can you give me an example of a sensory experience that relieves the pain?
I am totally tensed, nervous, and I need to watch a movie, or I need to have a hug, or
okay.
Immediately I get, I just want to get out of, completely relief from that problem that I'm going through.
Correct. So, see, very, very good question. Very and a complex scenario also, right? So it can be interpreted, explained in many different ways, right? For example, when you are stressed, okay, it could be because you are in conflict with somebody, okay, or you are worried about somebody, right? So maybe in that time, at that time, you are spending energy at a very fast rate. Okay, you're worried about something, and you're spending more energy than you would be spending when you are spending, let's say, listening to music. Okay, your energy, you're stressed out now, you're spending energy at a very fast rate. Then you listen to a good music that you like. Music is, let's say, is lesser than that stressful experience, that frequency. You are spending suddenly spending energy at a lesser rate because of that. Even though it is a sensory experience, it is something that that has reduced the expense, a faster speed of expenditure of your energy into a slower speed. So that could be an answer to what you said. There are many different variations that you can talk about. Okay.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Now, we explained death in the context of pain, disease also. The similar way also, old age also, death happens. Okay. Your metabolic process is not spending as much energy, and you are losing energy due to the Earth's rotation at a faster speed. As a result, the same way, the energy that goes in cannot come out beyond a certain age, right? It all converges, and the sexual vital fluid sac breaks, the life energy dissolves, the soul comes out, the genetic center comes out, the magnetic intensification comes out, right? So if this such a kind of natural death happens, okay, when somebody is really deceased, or somebody dies after, let's say, or close to 100 years, the energy, the biomagnetic intensification of the person, it will be very weak. Okay, it will be only at from a 30-40% stock force. Okay, so the intensity will not be as strong as that as the soul of a younger person that might have died. Okay, so when for these kind of souls, okay, I'm going to start using the word soul for the biomagnetic energy intensification that's separated from due to death. Okay, so hereafter I'm going to use the word soul. So when the soul separates from such a person dying a natural death due to old age or due to prolonged disease, that is very weak, and it can easily merge and become completely absorbed by somebody that is very compatible to that energy. Okay, so particularly family members. Swamiji says, even though you and your father, for example, have grown way different in the past 20-30 years, in the universal time scale, right? The energy, the life energy of your father and your life energy have traveled thousands of years and accumulated that character. Okay, so the difference between your father's energy and your energy is probably 20 years. It's very negligible. So it is easy for your energy to easily accept your father's energy or your mother's energy, for example. Okay, so after death, by way of rituals, okay, family members can easily accept the soul of a parent, okay, or somebody within the family. Okay, so in the funeral ceremonies, they come around 3 times the body before the burial or before the cremation. Okay, so after death, before we talk about that, okay, after death, the soul does not leave the body. It only floats above the body. Okay, it floats only above the body. Okay, and at the time of funeral or cremation, the soul is exactly above the body. Okay, it doesn't go anywhere else. Okay, because it knows that its home was that body, and it is naturally attracted towards that body. Okay, it doesn't know how to get back in, but it is closely floating close to the body. And when the family member comes around 3 times and says, I will accept your life or your desires and fulfill it, immediately the soul is merged into the family member's genetic center. Okay, So this is one way the soul that left the body of a person can be absorbed by a family member. Okay, this can be done during the funeral ceremony, like I explained. Even after the funeral, also it can happen in other ways, right? Because there's a natural attraction between the souls. And for the first 14 days or so, the body of the receptor will go through certain changes. So they say you have to undergo certain austerities and rituals to withstand that shock and completely merge that soul within your soul. Okay, so this is one way. And sometimes a non-family member can also get the attached soul. Okay, for example, let's say you are researching, you're a scientist and you're researching something very deeply in a specific field, and the soul of somebody else that is researching in the same field, when he dies, okay, can through specific gravity come back to you. Okay, so that is one more way that a non-family member can also get that soul attachment. Okay, so for this natural kind of deaths, the soul intensity is very less, and it is easy to accept based on the specific gravity principle, based on the compatible nature of the personalities. Okay, so this is a natural death. Any questions so far?
Question here: does the receptor come to know of the soul attachment?
Not very easily. Somebody that is evolved and spiritually advanced can probably feel it, but normally you don't feel it. Okay, in this kind of scenarios, normally you don't feel it because it's very compatible, right? The same characters will be exhibited. Maybe some minor differences might be there because of the attached soul. Okay. Now, when somebody
I have a question. Like, I mean, this is when we are doing the rituals, the soul, the biomagnetic energy will go. But I mean, I read so many things about the siddhas. Is that the same concept when the siddhas, when they leave their body, the soul leaves the body? Is it will be a floating in the universal field, or how it is?
So a majority of the siddhas, okay, many of the siddhas, let's say, they attained a different kind of samadhi. Okay, they said they called it jiva samadhi, for example, right? So what happens there is that when the siddhas, they achieve everything that they want to achieve in the world using their physical body, they still want to serve the humanity through their energy. Then they decide to go into what is called jiva samadhi, and at that time, what they do is they go into a yoga called Lambika yoga. Okay, so it is called a hibernation technique. It is essentially a hibernation technique, just like the frogs do it. The frogs have long tongue. Okay, the tongue of a frog is very long, a tadpole or frog. When the tongue is what it does during hibernation is it takes the tongue inside and closes the windpipe, okay, upwards. When this happens, immediately the energy center shifts and everything comes to the top, the pineal gland equivalent place. And siddhas followed the same technique using a yoga called Lambika yoga. And at that time, when the energy all comes to the top, now the energy doesn't leave the body and it is permanently connected to the universal energy, universal consciousness. And they go into a cave or a protected place. They ask their disciples to check their body after 3 days by touching their big toe. If it has not decayed, they say, okay, close the cave, close my samadhi, and I'm going to stay inside, right? So it is sort of like a paralyzed state of body through which they accept death. It's actually not death. It is a living death, actually. Okay, so that is siddhas, how siddhas soul are used in one way. Okay, we'll talk about another way pretty soon. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so whenever they attain Jiva Samadhi, that is one way. Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure, thank you.
And whenever this Samadhi, around the Samadhi, there is a continuous cosmic energy field at such a low vibration that these places, Samadhi places, become temples of worship. Okay, Tirupati, a lot of
Yes,
temples
yeah.
you guys already know. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I've seen that so many I mean, the funeral, they won't do funeral, they will keep as a Jiva Samadhi. So I just raised this question. Thank you.
Jiva Samadhi is essentially this. There is a very subtle delta state energy field there because of the Siddha's mind, and their energy has never left the body. So you are going to a place of worship, actually, where
Yes, yeah.
somebody meditating in the delta state. Okay, so imagine how much providence will be there. Correct. Right. Now talk about accident.
Sorry to interrupt, Murali. Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
I understand about Jiva Samadhi. The power is so humongous that anybody can feel when we go around it or near to that, like just entering into the temple or anywhere closer to that.
Correct.
But if you go to Aliyar, you can see the same thing. But Maharishi did not go for Jiva Samadhi, right? What is that difference? Still, anybody, any new person enter into the Aliyar temple of consciousness, they could feel that energy. So can you describe a little bit? I don't know whether I'm taking much time, but just few lines.
Very good question. I may not be able to do 100% justice to this question with my answer, but I will try. See, Maharishi's physical body, okay, is also very pure. Okay, so there is going to be certain vibrations coming from that. And Maharishi's mind, okay, his soul, okay, has a divine desire ingrained in it, right? So his energy field, his energy, his personality or his genetic center is merged with the universal magnetic field, but in very closely tied to our ashram, to our center and its purpose. Okay, so it is not only Aliyar, Maharishi Samadhi, any place where we go to our center and meditate for the objective that Maharishi has given us, his presence can always be felt. That is one thing. The second thing is, in his Samadhi, there are so many people coming and meditating on a daily basis, and that energy field is also going to contribute to. Okay, so Aliyar ashram in general, Maharishi and all the different temple of consciousness that Maharishi has blessed, right? He has put such a strong sankalpa that is closely tied to the universal energy field that gives a own unique sense of lower frequency to all those places that are associated with this objective. Okay, so that is how I'm going to explain it. But like I said, I may not be able to do 100% justice.
No, thank you.
Hello, Murali.
Yeah, please.
The soul attachment is any time frame or any time, or how long is going to prevail in the universe when it is to be attached? Is there any time frame?
Good question. Okay, so the soul, when it leaves the body, okay, the soul is used to a very damp place. Okay, damp means in the body, inside the body there is a lot of blood, correct? And what else is inside the body? There is darkness. Okay, so the soul will always find a place that is damp or dark. Okay, so if it cannot find a compatible soul to immediately attach itself to, okay, the soul might be closely, will not stay in a place of light or sound. Okay, if there is light, it will not stay there. If it is sound, lot of sound, it will not stay there. But it can go to a dark corner of some home, some dark and abandoned home. It can stay there for years there. Okay, and it can also stay some violent souls, they call it, when somebody dies an accidental death, when somebody dies very young, the energy is very intense, right? This energy cannot leave the energy field of the earth. It has to be very close to the earth. So that soul has to be either close to a water body, okay, because it's damp. And it can also be close to a dark tree, okay, and stay attached to a tree. So these are the places a soul can stay, and it can stay for a long time. And for the imprints of that soul to completely disintegrate without attachment, it will take up to 7 generations, they say, 140 years. Okay. So does that answer your question, Ayya?
Yes, Murali. Nandri. Thanks.
Okay. So these are the
quick question about this one. And also there is a question from Kalpana Palanchami in the chat. You better watch the chat also, people typing questions there. The one that you just explained, is that content to the sky philosophy or its assumption?
This is Swamiji, what Swamiji said. I'm just repeating what Swamiji stated in his explanation of sky philosophy.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Murali Master, yeah, Kalpana here. So I studied, but I think everybody knows that Vallalar was with Swamiji for some time and he guided. Is that correct?
That is very correct, because Swamiji himself stated that. Okay.
Yeah. So that means that also happened with the same theory, soul attached to a like-minded person, and it found a person.
Yeah, I'm looking at your question also. This law of attraction, right? It is called, Swamiji gave it a name, okay? Compatibility theory, right? Specific gravity principle, okay? So whichever frequency resonates with each other, they can come and join with each other, okay? In Tamil, it's called Tulliya Samadala Sirmai, okay? And let us, since everyone is asking about saint soul, okay? So anybody that is self-realized, we talked about Jiva Samadhi, okay? Leave that out, okay? So self-realized people's soul, okay, has a more faster liberating speed. Okay, liberating speed means the ability to escape the Earth's gravitational field. Okay, so when somebody that is self-realized and finishes his world without attaining Jiva Samadhi, okay, their soul can either be Earth in the Earth's gravity at some time, okay, at some points of time. They can also be in the sun's gravity at some point of time, or in the universal field also at some point of time. Okay, so there are Sanskrit names for these different energy boundaries. Okay, so if a soul is in the Earth's gravitational pull, okay, that place is called Salokyam. Okay, Salokyam. Okay, and when the soul escapes the Earth's gravity and goes to the sun's gravitational field, it is called as Samipyam. Okay, and when it escapes the sun's gravity also and goes into the universal field, it is called Sarupyam. Okay, when it doesn't come back to these boundaries and merges with the absolute space beyond the universal field, that boundary is called Sayuchyam. Okay, this is explained in the theory of life before birth and after death. So I just wanted to share these terms with you, so you are not unaware of it. Okay, Earth's gravity, sun's gravity, universal field, and beyond that absolute space. Okay, now the souls whenever the soul attaches with somebody, right, what happens is the receptor, the carrier of the soul, okay, keeps getting the impulse of the imprints from the attached soul. Okay, so when the desire of the attached soul's imprint is fulfilled by the carrier, okay, then that imprint is now relieved from the attached soul. Okay, like this, the attached soul sheds its imprints, removes its imprints one by one using the carrier. Okay, and finally, when it lightens enough, then it subsides into the person, all the compatible imprints subside into the person, and it is liberated. Okay, all the good imprints can now leave the person, and it can go to the sun's gravity or universal gravity. Okay, so that is one path. Now the souls of self-realized people that died, okay, can probably go to the sun's gravitational field and come back to the earth's gravitational field at appropriate points of time. It doesn't take them much time. The soul moves at the speed of light, according to Swamiji. Okay, according to the specific gravity principle, it can come immediately. Okay, now let's keep this in mind, and we will explore the souls of self-realized people a little bit more after we talk about the souls of people that died from accidental deaths. Okay, so souls of people that died from accidental deaths, okay, their soul cannot live too much away from the earth. Okay, and they cannot easily be compatible with anybody also, correct? Because when they died because of either suicide or due to an accident, their soul became so agitated with fear and shock that it has its own unique characteristic. Now it cannot easily attach to anybody unless under special circumstances. Okay, so like I said, it can be near a water body, or it can be near a tree. Okay, or it can be in a dark place somewhere. Okay, so when somebody goes in that area and their astral energy projects outside their body, okay, only at that time these violent souls can attach into that other person. Okay, only, this is the key word, only when there is an astral projection from the carrier, from the person, okay, the violent soul can attach to that person. Okay, how does this astral projection happen? Okay, if you think about that, okay, so if you wear perfume, for example, your life energy tends to expand away from your body. Okay, so in the old days, they used to say, particularly weak or people that are fearful, even they say girls, for example, don't put flowers, jasmine flowers, for example, and go into the dark outside the home. Okay, that is a very dangerous thing to do. Okay, so the reason is, when there is an astral projection and when there is a sudden fear for whatever reason, when somebody is thinking about ghosts and walking outside, already he is very fearful about darkness, some natural phenomenon happens, suddenly astral projection happens, and there is a violent soul nearby, it can attach. Okay, so this attachment, when it happens, what happens to the carrier? There will not be easy compatibility, right? So what happens there is, whenever the soul, the characters of the attached soul takes precedence, okay, it pushes the carrier soul to the background and the attached soul comes to the front. Okay, and the characters of the personality of the person that was carrying disappears, and the person starts behaving like somebody totally different. Okay, this is a trance kind of state. So in this trance kind of state, all the characters of the attached soul starts exhibiting. Okay, so somebody that was killed might be able to come and tell, I was murdered by this guy. I left my money in this place. If you go and look, it will be exactly in that place. Okay, so all these kind of details that's attached soul can come and tell you in that trance state. Okay, so even the violent souls, after some time, they lose their intensity. So initially, for a period of time, these violent souls can take over, and the person might go into a trance kind of situation and start exhibiting this possessed behavior, and they call it ghost attachment or whatever. This is possessed by a ghost, right? So even this phenomenon subsides after some time. The attached soul loses its intensity, and the person will slowly start becoming normal. Okay, and there are some rituals performed in tantric practices to make these souls subside faster, or I don't know if they might be able to remove some of the energy also outside. Okay, Yerwadi, for example, you might have heard in Tamil Nadu, there are different places, okay, where they have a way of dealing with these possessed souls. Okay, any questions here? Okay.
One question.
Yeah.
Does the soul attach to one receptor or can it attach to multiple receptors?
I wouldn't say a violent soul can get attached to multiple receptors, but somebody that is good, okay, even a normal person, his soul can be accepted by multiple people. It can be split into and accepted by multiple family members. I've heard Swamiji say that. Okay. And another way also, one can be possessed by multiple souls according to Swamiji. Multiple souls can also be attached to you without you knowing. Okay. You might be having that energy characteristics. Your great grandfather and grandfather maybe, okay, may be attached to you, or grandfather and father, okay, that is also possible. Okay.
So one question from related to this. Okay. When we are doing mirror gazing meditation, we are bringing the energy out on the periphery, right? Biomagnetic energy.
Yes.
So is that not safe while doing in the dark? Does it mean like that?
That is why I advise to do mirror gazing only in the Brahma Muhurtam times, right? Specific times in the morning. At that time,
4 to 7.
Yeah, exactly. The gravitational field is such that the violent souls cannot be present in the earth, in the places that are lighted and wherever you are there, right?
Okay, thank you.
And then one more thing is you cannot do proper mirror gazing unless your mind is in a non-emotional frequency. Okay, so when you do mirror gazing, you do protection to you, give protection to yourself, and unless your mind contracts within your body, okay, your energy is in a alpha state. You cannot engage in mirror gazing. Mirror gazing will not be possible at all. Okay, so in that frequency also, violent souls or any other negative energy cannot come near you. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Now there are multiple examples you can look at. For example, Swamiji says, let's say your family is very deeply devotional towards a musician, a music genius, okay, and the parents are very they themselves don't have no music, but they appreciate music, and they are very devotional towards a specific music genius. And when the music genius, that music personality dies, that soul, because of this compatibility and devotion, can get attached to the parent, and it can be transferred to the child that is conceived in that parent also. Okay, so that is where you see many phenomenons where after when the soul is attached and grows in the newly conceived child, it will be dormant until 3 years of age. After 3 years of age, it starts exhibiting its qualities. The child may be able to correctly identify specific different ragas, may be able to sing music effortlessly, right? In the perfect raga, right? Perfect with the perfect ups and downs. So all this is possible because of the attached soul, which exhibits its qualities through the child. Okay, so this is another way where a soul can get attached to a parent and gets transferred to the child, and the child starts exhibiting the characteristics. Now this is for very good souls, when it is good souls. But when there is souls with negative imprints or bad imprints that get attached to the parent and gets transferred to the child by any chance, the womb, the soul will destroy the baby in the womb itself, according to Swamiji. Okay, and the child can never grow. Okay, now that is another variation. Now, in some cases, you might be the parents might be deeply devotional to towards a Mahan, towards a saint, and there in the society also at the same time, people are aching for guidance. Okay, people are longing for guidance, divine guidance, because of various problems in the society. At that time, the soul of a self-realized person can get attached with the parent, because the parent is very pure, has good thoughts, devotional towards the towards the saint, and now has a compatible genetic center. Now that energy can get transferred to the baby also. So that baby, that child when born, now will be very, very disciplined and very advanced in terms of maturity in the young age itself. Okay, and these kind of births are called avatars. And most cases, according to Swamiji, these children may not live beyond 12 years of age, because their imprints are so pure. They might die a natural death prematurely, because they don't have any desires, and without desires the soul will not stay in the body, right? But in some cases, if they go on to live beyond 12 years of age, according to Swamiji, they become great leaders in the world, great saints and avatars in the world, avatara purushas in the world. Okay, so that is another possibility in an attached soul. Any questions? Okay. So Swamiji himself has given an example. I listened to one of his lectures when he said in Rishikesh, similar kind of child, she was a divine person's soul was attached, and she will be very respectful to the parents, and she will not accept any food from anybody else. Okay, she will only take food from her parents. And they introduced her to Swamiji, and she said, Swamiji said, can I try giving her food? And Swamiji said, they said yes, and Swamiji cut a piece of fruit and offered it to the child. And the child, to everyone's amazement, came in front of Swamiji, worshipped him, and received the food, and went to the corner and started eating it. So such great phenomenons also happen in this kind of fashion. Okay, so this is. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, Murli, there is actually, I just read, there is one more possibility, right? Like sometimes if the children die within 14 years, the soul might go to the parent, right? Can you please brief me on that?
Sure. So Swamiji has explained this in other contexts also. People that lose their children, they suffer so much, right? There is no such thing greater than putra soham, they say. So the children that die naturally at a young age, they are so close to their parents. Okay, according to Swamiji, the energy immediately gets merged with the parents, and sometimes the grandparents also, but immediately in most cases gets merged with the parents, because the child hasn't started accumulating too much imprints. Okay, so without even the need for rituals, the energy becomes compatible, is already compatible with the energy, and immediately gets attached to the parents' energy. Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Rajendran. Now, what did we understand from all these things, right? We have, due to respectful, researchers in trying to understand the concept of life before birth and after death, people have made some assumptions. Okay, there is nothing wrong in that, but except that they were probably calculated a little incorrectly. As a result, we have concepts like, we were born as somebody else before in our previous birth. I came and I'm born again. I will be born again later on. Okay, if that is the case, Swamiji asked the question: wouldn't the population of the world be the same? If everyone is reborn again, wouldn't the population of the world be the same, right? And for this, somebody who was shocked by the question came with the answer that an animal can be reborn as a human. Okay, Swamiji says that is not possible at all. Whenever a life energy the genetic center of a 5 sense or lesser sense animal and a human being will never be compatible. Okay, so there is no rebirth from animals. And one more thing is, the life energy that left the body can never come back into the body. Okay, there is a Sivavakir poem that you might have all heard, right? Karanda Pal Mulai Puha, Iranda Uir Udal Puha. Irandavar மீண்டும் பிறக்க மாட்டாரே, or something like that it will go. Okay, so like this, there is no such thing as the concept of rebirth. Our rebirth is the birth of our children, and our soul gets dissipates itself into the absolute space in this fashion. Okay, now one concept that Swamiji explains is, many people will ask the question, during the time of my death, what should I do? Okay, during the time of my death, what should I do? Okay, so some people say chant Hey Ram or chant the name of the God, right? So Swamiji says, immediately you should try to, at the time of your death, you should try to expand your mind to the state of Turyadidam. If during your lifetime you have practiced Turyadidam and reduced your imprints considerably and have achieved some level of success in regulating your 6 temperaments, you will be able to immediately follow the path that you have practiced every day as part of your meditation practice, going to the moon, going to the sun, and the universal field and absolute space, right? So you know the path like the back of your palm, right? So Swamiji says, it is during the time of death, try to expand your mind to Turyadidam. Think about Turyadidam. Even if you don't think about, only that thought will come for those people that have practiced it on an everyday basis. Okay, so these people, Swamiji calls them as Jivan Muktars. Okay, what is the name? Jivan Muktars. So you guys all are practicing Brahmanyanam, have attained Brahmanyanam, practicing Turyadidam on a daily basis. Who are all Jivan Muktars?
Everyone.
Every one of us that is practicing Sky Yoga, practicing Turyadidam, are Jivan Muktars. For us, after death, if we achieve enough success in regulating our 6 temperaments, then our soul already knows where to go. Okay, it doesn't have to go and attach and go into dark places or get stuck in haunted houses, right? Okay, all right. This is also Swamiji's great blessing to us. Okay, so we have all been given the status of Jivan Muktars by Swamiji. Okay.
But one question out of this topic, but Patanjali created, say, Maharishi, or after initiation, he became a big saint. Like Maharishi, we have many saints who created by Maharishi, because I would say his philosophy, who was following, we are sometimes becoming like Maharishi. Like in this, many times we will say from the family, hats off to Maharishi, because of him you are behaving so good, like this. It is only for a brief amount of time. Whereas like Maharishi, throughout the life, can anyone become like that? Or do you have anybody in mind who is like Maharishi?
No, but
why I'm asking is, if he has given a lot of good things, 2000 poems or many good things that is needed in the life, which everybody realizes it. Only thing is, we are not able to consistently follow his path throughout the life, so that we don't need to suffer in pain or misery. So just I want to understand that as well.
So Maharishi wanted us, Siva, all of us to become like him, right? So if you look at many of us, look at yourself, look at your fellow practitioners, teachers, professors, right? Everyone you will see is going through a purification of a cycle of purifying the genetic center. Okay, all of us that are able to practice on a day-to-day basis, we will be learning more and more about ourselves and purifying more and more of ourselves and becoming better versions of ourselves as years progress. Okay, I've experienced this in my own life. You probably definitely have experienced it in your life, right? So
yeah, I agree. A lot of miracles are happening. There is no question at all.
Okay.
Not even one. But
Yeah.
what my question is, overall, end to end, if you look at, I am another Maharishi. That kind of state we could not come. I could not see anybody like that practically. We are able to go to that peak certain period of time,
Correct.
but not throughout the life. Which,
Correct.
if you become throughout the life, then the life will be completely peaceful, right? So I'm just trying to think in that angle.
So there are going to be many different possibilities here, right? One is one can become an avatar or a perfect person like Maharishi in this own lifetime through our own efforts. Okay, so if anybody makes the choice to put all the efforts and be focused on the goal of regulating 6 temperaments, sublimating the personality, and going through the perfection of the mindset, then in the same lifetime, Maharishi has said, we can become like him. Okay. Now, why is nobody becoming that? It is everyone's choice. Okay. Every human being, according to Maharishi, has been blessed with the freedom of choice. Okay. That is the most key important concept. The freedom of choice. Okay. We have, on one side, we have freedom of choice to accelerate our journey towards perfection, Shiva. On another side, we do not have freedom of choice. Okay, whether we like it or not, we are moving towards perfection. Okay, so the right side, no freedom of choice journey takes its time. Okay, this generation, so many Vedatrians are already Siddhas because they have already realized their life energy. They are purifying their genetic center. In 2 or 3 generations from now, people will be closer to Maharishi without too much efforts. But if through freedom of choice, if people like you and me choose to be focused on what Maharishi taught us, then we will be able to become like Maharishi in the same lifetime. This is the answer.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you.
Okay. And okay, so yeah, few other things. I think we have taken a lot of time. Yearly Srardham, right? Yearly, we do whatever we do for our forefathers. According to Maharishi, enough if you understand the concept. There are so much rituals and businesses in between. So if you understand the concept, we can do the right thing. So essentially, according to Maharishi, when the sun, depending on the sun or moon's position, when at the time of the parents' departure, for example, right? There will be, in the same position comes, there will be a weakness to the life energy of the children, son or daughter, right? At that time, it's better to observe certain austerities, observe vradam, and eat light food. Okay, you don't have to completely avoid food, eat light food. This is exactly Swamiji's words, right? And keep our mind in good thoughts. Okay, so we can withstand the weakness in our life energy and keep their thoughts in our mind, right? So this kind of things and all are questions around life before birth and after death. Okay, near-death experiences is nothing like but an astral projection, for example. Sometimes when your energy is so low because of a disease or because of some accident, your energy projects out from your Manipurak chakra, but it doesn't leave the body because the sexual vital fluid sac is still strong enough. Okay, so your entire lifetime plays before your mind, and then after some time, when the body naturally, due to the rest, regains the energy, then the astral projection comes back into the body. Okay, so that person will come back and say, I went close to the jaws of death, now I'm back. During my death experience, my entire life played out in front of my eyes, and I could see all the things that I wouldn't even remember right now. He would say all those things. So those are near-death experiences. Okay, so this is life before birth and after death. When we understand this, we will be able to live our life in the light of this knowledge, and focus on what our Guru has taught us, and focus on purifying our genetic center, So we don't contaminate our own children with our impurities, for example, right? So that is life before and birth and after death for you guys. I rest my case. Any questions? Any comments?
Thank you so much. You covered everything, I think. Thank you. Be blessed with everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hi,
Very nice.
Uh,
Thank you.
so
Hi,
Master
Murli.
Murali, Valha Valamudan.